The pained whimper escaped from somewhere deep in his throat, a sound no dog should ever make. The once proud German shepherd lay sprawled on the dusty Arizona ground, ribs protruding like accusatory fingers through his matted coat. Another kick landed against his side. He didn't even have the strength to yelp anymore. "Worthless mutt," the man spat, wiping sweat from his brow in the punishing Prescott heat. No one stopped. No one helped. The few passers-by in the abandoned lot averted their eyes, quickening their pace. Just another stray getting what strays get in this forgotten corner of town. 6 months later, that same dog stood tall at Prescott City Hall, adorned with a medal that gleamed against his now healthy coat. As cameras flashed, not a dry eye remained in the crowd. What happened in those 6 months? How did a beaten, dying stray bring an entire city to tears? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Dr. Rebecca Anderson pulled her pickup truck into the parking lot of Small Paws Veterinary Clinic just as the morning sun crested the mountains surrounding Prescott. At 35, Rebecca had established herself as one of the most respected veterinarians in Yavapai County. Her clinic, housed in a renovated Victorian building on the outskirts of Prescott's historic district, was known for taking the cases other vets deemed hopeless. The morning air carried the scent of ponderosa pines and desert sage, a combination that still, after 7 years, made Rebecca pause and take a deep breath before starting her day. Prescott had become home after she'd fled Chicago following her parents' deaths. A drunk driver with ties to a drug operation had taken them both in an instant. The small Arizona city, with its blend of Old West charm and modern amenities, had been her sanctuary. "Morning, Dr. Anderson," called Martha Johnson from across the street. The 78-year-old widow was tending to her prize-winning roses, her hands protected by gardening gloves that had seen better days. "Good morning, Martha. Those roses looking mighty fine this year," Rebecca called back, waving. "Good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, they'll take blue ribbon again," Martha responded with a wink before returning to her careful pruning. Inside the clinic, Rebecca's assistant, Lily Turner, was already preparing for the day. "Coffee's fresh, and you've got Mrs. Winters bringing in her Persian at 9, she said, handing Rebecca a steaming mug. "Thanks, Lily. Anything else I should know about?" "Sheriff called. Said they might need you for something. Wouldn't say what." Lily's expression was guarded. In small towns like Prescott, the relationship between local businesses and law enforcement was always complicated. Rebecca nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. The sheriff's department had been calling more frequently lately, ever since the new police chief, William Crawford, had taken office, promising to clean up Prescott. What exactly needed cleaning in their peaceful mountain town, Rebecca wasn't sure. As she made her way to her office, Rebecca glanced at the memorial photo of her parents on her desk. James and Catherine Anderson, smiling on a Chicago rooftop, unaware that 3 weeks after the photo was taken, they'd be gone forever. Some days, the pain felt as fresh as it had 10 years ago. Rebecca didn't know it, but by sunset, her orderly life would be upended by a half-dead German shepherd with secrets that would rock Prescott to its core. The dog that would force her to confront not only the truth about her adopted hometown, but also the carefully constructed lies about her own past. For Dr. Rebecca Anderson wasn't simply a small-town veterinarian seeking peace after tragedy. She was something else entirely, and the arrival of one brutalized dog would expose everything she'd worked so hard to hide. The call came at 2:17 p.m. just as Rebecca was finishing a routine dental cleaning on Mrs. Hennessy's poodle. "Dr. Anderson, it's Officer Pete Dawson. We've got a situation at the old Fairfield property on Route 89. Dog in bad shape. Real bad shape." Rebecca's stomach tightened at the tone in Pete's voice. The young officer wasn't one for exaggeration. "How bad are we talking, Pete?" "Worst I've seen in my 5 years on the force, Doc." Not sure he'll make it to your clinic if we move him." 20 minutes later, Rebecca's truck kicked up dust as she pulled onto the dirt access road of the abandoned Fairfield property. Once a prosperous cattle ranch, the land had fallen into disrepair after Old Man Fairfield passed. Now it was just empty buildings and scrubland, occasionally used by teenagers for parties or worse. 2 police cruisers were parked near a dilapidated shed. Pete waved her over, his young face grim under his regulation hat. "He's in there." We were responding to a call about suspicious activity when we heard whimpering. Rebecca grabbed her emergency kit from the passenger seat. "Anyone around when you arrived?" Pete shook his head. "Place was empty. Whoever did this was long gone." The stench hit her first. Blood, infection, urine, and fear. The smell of death's waiting room. In the corner of the shed, partially hidden behind a rusted barrel, lay what she initially mistook for a pile of dirty rags. Then it moved, ever so slightly, and Rebecca's professional detachment faltered. The German Shepherd was nearly unrecognizable as a dog, let alone a specific breed. His coat, what remained of it, was matted with blood and filth. Open wounds crisscrossed his emaciated body. One ear hung partially detached, and a deep gash ran from his right eye down to his jaw. But it was the dog's eyes that stopped Rebecca cold. They weren't vacant with approaching death as she'd expected. They watched her with a chilling awareness, pain and intelligence swimming in those amber depths. "Jesus Christ," Rebecca whispered, kneeling slowly beside the animal. "Who did this to you, boy?" The dog's tail, broken in at least 2 places, twitched slightly, not a wag, just acknowledgement. "Is he... Can you..." Pete couldn't finish the question. Rebecca gently placed her hand near the dog's nose, letting him catch her scent. The dog didn't growl or attempt to snap, both concerning signs from an injured animal. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength, then looked directly at her again. "I need to examine him before we move him." Rebecca spoke softly, opening her kit. "Pete, I need you to get the stretcher from my truck." The initial assessment was grim. Multiple fractures, severe dehydration and malnutrition, infected wounds that suggested the abuse had been ongoing for weeks. A heavy chain around his neck had embedded so deeply it had to be carefully cut away, revealing raw, putrid flesh beneath. "This wasn't random cruelty," Rebecca said as they carefully transferred the dog to the stretcher. "This was systematic torture. Someone wanted this animal to suffer before dying." Pete looked away, jaw tight. "What kind of monster does something like this?" "The human kind," Rebecca replied coldly. "Let's get him to the clinic. He's hanging on for a reason, and I'll be damned if we let him down now." The drive back was tense, Rebecca checking the rearview mirror every few seconds to ensure the dog was still breathing in the makeshift bed she'd created in the truck bed. Pete followed behind in his cruiser, lights flashing to clear their path. At the clinic, Lily had prepared the surgical room as instructed over the phone. Her gasp when they brought in the stretcher spoke volumes. "My God, Rebecca. How is he even alive?" "Sheer will," Rebecca answered, already reaching for surgical gloves. "Call Dr. Thompson for backup, and tell Sheriff Wallace I want whoever did this found yesterday." For the next 4 hours, Rebecca and Sam Thompson, the senior veterinarian who'd mentored her when she first arrived in Prescott, worked to save the dog's life. They set bones, cleaned wounds, administered antibiotics, plasma, and fluids. Throughout it all, the dog remained eerily still, only his eyes moving, watching their every move. "He's not fighting us," Sam noted as he sutured the ear. "Most animals in this condition would be in such shock they'd either be completely unresponsive or fighting from pain. This one, he's cooperating." Rebecca nodded, placing an IV. "He knows we're helping. This isn't just any stray, Sam. This dog's been trained, well trained. As if in confirmation, the dog's eyes shifted to her face. By midnight, they'd done all they could. The dog was stabilized, heavily medicated, and clean for perhaps the first time in months. Rebecca sat beside the kennel where he rested, monitoring his breathing. "You should go home," Sam said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Lily can stay overnight." Rebecca shook her head. "I'm staying. There's something about this one, Sam. I can't explain it." Sam studied her face for a moment. "You know, in 30 years of practice, I've learned to trust those feelings. Call me if anything changes." Alone with the dog, Rebecca found herself talking softly. "You're a fighter, aren't you? Not many would have survived what you've been through." She carefully extended her hand into the kennel, not touching him, but letting him sense her presence. "I need to call you something besides dog. How about Ranger? You look like you've been through a war, and that's a good soldier name." At the name, the dog's eyes opened slightly, focusing on her face. "Ranger it is, then." Rebecca smiled. Rest now. You're safe." As the night deepened, Rebecca dozed in the uncomfortable chair beside Ranger's kennel. She dreamed of Chicago, of her parents, of the long road that had led her to Prescott. Her subconscious wove images of German shepherds in police vests, of dark warehouses, of whispered conversations in back rooms. She woke with a start at dawn, momentarily disoriented. A soft whine brought her attention to the kennel. Ranger was awake, watching her with those unnerving eyes. "Morning, soldier," she said softly, checking his IV. "You made it through the night. That's step one." Rebecca carefully opened the kennel door to examine him. As she leaned in, something metallic caught her attention, partially hidden in the thick fur around his neck that hadn't been shaved for treatment. Gently parting the fur, she found a small metal object embedded in the skin. Not a microchip, but something similar. "What have we here?" she murmured, carefully extracting it. It was a small metal tag, tarnished and bent, but with clear engravings. K9 unit and a number, 847. Rebecca stared at the tag, then at Ranger, whose eyes hadn't left her face. "You're a police dog," she whispered. "Or you were." The implications hit her immediately. This wasn't a random case of animal cruelty. Someone had deliberately tortured a trained police dog, a crime with much heavier consequences than ordinary animal abuse. And if Ranger was indeed a K9 officer, where was his human partner? Why wasn't the dog reported missing? Rebecca reached for her phone, then hesitated. In a small town like Prescott, word traveled fast. If she reported this to the sheriff now, how long before the entire department knew? Including, potentially, whoever had done this to Ranger. "Let's keep this between us for now," she told the dog, pocketing the tag. "At least until you're stronger, and I know more about what happened to you." Little did she know that this decision would set in motion events that would uncover secrets buried deep in Prescott's foundations, and put both her and Ranger squarely in the crosshairs of people who would do anything to keep those secrets buried. 3 days after finding Ranger, Rebecca was finishing her morning rounds when a sharp knock on the clinic's front door startled her. The clinic wasn't due to open for another hour. Through the glass, she spotted a tall man in his early 40s. Sandy hair cropped short, wearing a brown leather jacket despite the growing heat of the Arizona morning. The badge clipped to his belt caught the sunlight. Prescott Police Department. Rebecca hesitated before unlocking the door. "Can I help you?" "Detective Jack Harmon," the man said, flashing his credentials. "Mind if I come in, Dr. Anderson? I'd like to talk about the dog you found." Something in his tone, professional but with an undercurrent of urgency, made Rebecca step aside. As he entered, she noted his watchful eyes scanning the clinic's waiting room, the slight tension in his shoulders. This wasn't a routine follow-up. "Coffee?" she offered, leading him to her office. "Black, if you have it." He settled into the chair opposite her desk, waiting until she'd poured 2 cups from the pot she kept in her office before speaking again. "How's the dog doing?" "Touch and go," Rebecca answered carefully. "Multiple fractures, severe malnutrition, infected wounds. Whoever had him was methodical about the abuse." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "That's actually why I'm here. This isn't being treated as a routine animal cruelty case anymore." Rebecca feigned mild surprise. "Oh, why's that?" "Because," Jack said, leaning forward, "that's no ordinary stray. That dog is, or was, a police canine named Maximus, reported killed in action 6 months ago." Despite having suspected as much after finding the tag, hearing it confirmed sent a chill through Rebecca. Killed in action. Clearly that was premature. Very. Jack's expression darkened. His handler, Officer Daniel Matthews, was killed during a drug raid in March. Report said the dog was shot too, body never recovered due to a fire at the scene. He paused. "Except now we have a very much alive K9 with evidence of prolonged torture, not gunshot wounds." Rebecca took a slow sip of coffee. "Which means someone lied about what happened to him." "Exactly." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "The question is, why fake a police dog's death? And more importantly, who would keep him alive just to torture him for months?" "Someone with a grudge against the police?" Rebecca suggested. "Or specifically against Officer Matthews. Or someone who wanted to make sure the dog couldn't do his job anymore," Jack replied. "Maximus, your ranger, wasn't just any K9. He was specially trained to detect not just drugs, but also hidden compartments, false walls, secret storage. He could find things other dogs, and most officers, would miss." He leaned back in his chair. "Which made him particularly valuable for drug operations investigations. The implications hung in the air between them." Rebecca chose her words carefully. "Detective, are you suggesting that someone within the department might be involved?" Jack's face remained impassive. "I'm not suggesting anything yet, Doctor. But I would appreciate if you kept the details of the dog's identity between us for now." "Of course." Rebecca hesitated, then reached into her desk drawer, retrieving the small metal tag she'd found on Ranger. "I found this embedded in his fur. I'm guessing it came from his service collar." Jack took the tag, turning it over in his fingers. His expression remained neutral, but Rebecca caught a flash of something in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion? "Thank you for this. It's evidence now." He pocketed the tag. "I'd like to see him, if that's possible." Rebecca led Jack through the back of the clinic to the isolation room where Ranger was recovering. The dog was awake, lying on his side on a padded bed, an IV still providing fluids and medication. Various bandages and casts covered his worst injuries. At their entrance, Ranger's ears perked slightly, his eyes immediately locking onto Jack. A low growl rumbled in his throat, the first aggressive sound Rebecca had heard from him. "Easy, boy," Rebecca soothed, moving closer protectively. Jack remained in the doorway, studying the dog. "He doesn't know me. I never worked directly with Matthews or Maximus." "He seems to recognize what you are, though," Rebecca observed. "The uniform, maybe? Or just men in general. His abuser was likely male." "Could be." Jack didn't approach further. "What's your professional assessment? Will he recover?" "Physically? With time, most of his injuries should heal, though he'll have permanent scarring and possibly some mobility issues. Psychologically?" Rebecca shook her head. "That's harder to predict. He's been through extreme trauma." Jack nodded, still watching Ranger carefully. "Keep him secure. I'll be in touch once I know more." He turned to leave, then paused. "Dr. Anderson, be careful who you talk to about this. If my suspicions are correct, Maximus here is evidence in something much bigger than animal cruelty. After Jack left, Rebecca returned to Ranger's side, gently stroking the uninjured portion of his head. "So, you're Maximus, huh? Official police hero?" The dog's amber eyes studied her face. "But I think I'll still call you Ranger if that's okay with you. New life, new name." The dog's tail thumped once against the bed, the first positive response she'd seen from him. That evening, Rebecca was closing the clinic when she noticed a black pickup truck parked across the street. And the man behind the wheel was watching the clinic with unsettling intensity. When he saw her looking, he started the engine and drove away slowly, deliberately, a warning, not a retreat. Rebecca quickly locked up and called Jack. "Black Ford F-150, older model, Arizona plates. Couldn't get the number," she reported. "Driver was male, white, maybe 50s, gray beard." "Robert Wilson," Jack said immediately. "He's been on our radar. Former client of Matthew's during a domestic dispute last year. Stay where you are. I'm coming to escort you home." 20 minutes later, Jack arrived, following Rebecca to her small ranch house on the outskirts of town. As she parked in her driveway, he pulled up beside her. "I'll have a patrol car drive by regularly tonight," he said through his open window. "And Dr. Anderson, consider bringing the dog to your house. He might be safer there than at the clinic." Rebecca nodded, watching Jack drive away before entering her house. The empty rooms felt suddenly vulnerable, every shadow a potential threat. She double-checked the locks, then called the clinic technician who was monitoring Ranger overnight. "Jimmy, I need you to prepare Ranger for transport. I'm bringing him to my place." 2 hours later, Rebecca had converted her spare bedroom into a recovery space for Ranger. The dog seemed alert but exhausted by the move, his eyes constantly tracking her movements as she set up his medications. "Just you and me now, Ranger," she told him, settling into a chair beside his new bed. "We'll figure this out together." Around midnight, Rebecca was jolted awake by the sound of a vehicle outside. Peering through her curtains, she spotted the same black truck from earlier, driving slowly past her house. Robert Wilson was escalating, sending a clear message. He knew where she lived. The next morning, Rebecca was checking Ranger's bandages when her phone rang. Jack. "I need you to come to the station," he said without preamble. "Bring any medical records you have for the dog. Is everything okay? Just come in. Officially, we're taking your statement about the animal cruelty case." The Prescott Police Department was housed in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the historic structures surrounding it. Jack met Rebecca in the lobby, his expression professionally blank. "This way," he said, leading her to a small interview room. Once the door closed behind them, his demeanor changed. "We have a problem. Chief Crawford is taking a personal interest in the case. Isn't that good? More resources?" Jack's jaw tightened. Crawford was Matthew's supervisor. He signed off on the report saying Maximus was killed in action. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "So either he was lied to, or he was in on it," Jack finished. "Either way, I don't trust his sudden interest." "He's assigned another detective to the case, Thomas Reed. He's Crawford's right-hand man. What do we do? Play it straight for now. Give your statement, stick to the medical facts about the dog. Don't mention anything about his identity or my visit to the clinic." Jack checked his watch. "Reed will be here any minute. I'll try to stay in the room, but if Crawford pulls me out, don't reveal anything beyond basic veterinary information." Detective Reed proved to be everything Jack wasn't. Verbose, condescending, seemingly disinterested in the actual details of Ranger's condition. He asked perfunctory questions about where the dog was found, his injuries, his prognosis. "And where is the animal now?" Reed asked, not looking up from his notepad. "At my clinic, under observation," Rebecca lied smoothly, feeling Jack's approving glance. "Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Anderson. Reed closed his notepad. "Animal control will be following up. They'll likely take custody of the dog once he's stable, standard procedure in abuse cases." "That won't be necessary," Rebecca said firmly. "I've already begun rehabilitation protocols. Moving him again would be detrimental to his recovery." Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nevertheless, it's protocol. We'll be in touch." As Jack walked Rebecca out, he spoke quietly. "They're moving faster than I expected. Keep the dog hidden. I'll try to delay animal control, but be prepared. They could show up at your clinic any time." "What aren't you telling me, Detective?" Rebecca asked, stopping at the station entrance. Jack glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "Matthews wasn't just killed in a random drug raid. He was investigating corruption within the department, specifically missing evidence from drug busts. Large amounts of cash and drugs that never made it to the evidence room. And you think his own colleagues killed him for it?" "I think," Jack said carefully, "that Prescott has secrets worth killing for. And that dog of yours, he might be the key to exposing them all." As Rebecca drove back to her house, her mind raced. The veterinarian who'd come to Prescott seeking a quiet life away from Chicago's violence had inadvertently stepped into something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. But beneath her apprehension was a growing resolve. Whatever Ranger had witnessed, whatever had happened to Officer Matthews, she wouldn't let it stay buried. For the first time in years, Dr. Rebecca Anderson felt the familiar fire in her veins, the same determination that had once driven her in a very different career, long before she'd become a small-town veterinarian. Over the next 2 weeks, Ranger's physical recovery progressed with remarkable speed. The deep lacerations began to heal, his broken bones were mending, and he'd gained nearly 10 pounds on the special diet Rebecca prepared. But the psychological wounds remained raw. Certain sounds, car doors slamming, raised male voices, metal chains, would send him into a trembling panic, eyes wide with remembered terror. Rebecca converted her living room into a rehabilitation space, installing a specialized dog bed that supported his healing bones while allowing him more freedom of movement. Each day brought small victories: the first time he wagged his tail without wincing, his first hesitant steps across the room without support, the morning he actually barked at a squirrel outside the window. "That's it," Rebecca encouraged as she helped him through gentle physical therapy exercises. "You're getting stronger every day." Jack visited regularly, ostensibly checking on the animal cruelty case but actually building a careful rapport with the dog. Initially, Ranger would growl whenever Jack entered the room, backing away defensively. By the 3rd visit, the growling had stopped. By the 5th, Ranger allowed Jack to approach, sniffing his outstretched hand cautiously. "He's remembering his training," Jack observed as Ranger finally permitted him to stroke his head. "Canine officers are taught to trust the uniform, even if they don't know the specific officer." "Or maybe he just recognizes you're one of the good ones," Rebecca suggested, watching the interaction closely. Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Fewer of those than there should be, I'm afraid." During these visits, Jack shared what little progress he'd made investigating Daniel Matthews' death and the events that led to Ranger being found tortured and abandoned. "Matthews was a straight arrow by all accounts," Jack explained one evening as they sat on Rebecca's porch, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Ranger dozed nearby, his breathing deep and even for once. Divorced, no kids, lived for the job. He and Maximus, Ranger, had the highest drug bust record in the department for 3 years running. "Which would make him enemies in the drug world," Rebecca noted. "And potentially within the department," Jack added quietly. "I've been reviewing his cases. In the weeks before his death, Matthews filed several evidence discrepancy reports, noting differences between what was seized in raids and what eventually made it to the evidence room." "Suggesting someone was skimming drugs or money?" Jack nodded. His last report was filed the day before he died. He specifically requested an internal affairs investigation. He took a sip from the beer Rebecca had offered. That report mysteriously vanished from the system. I only found reference to it in Matthews's personal notes, which were nearly overlooked during the cleanup of his desk. Rebecca processed this information, scratching gently behind Ranger's good ear. So Matthews was killed to silence him, and Ranger was supposed to die too, but instead, someone kept him alive, tortured him. She frowned. But why? Why not just kill the dog? That's the question that keeps me up at night, Jack admitted. The only explanation that makes sense is that they needed him for something. Maybe to find something Matthews had hidden. Canines like Ranger are sometimes trained to respond to specific scents or locations known only to their handlers. A chill ran down Rebecca's spine despite the warm evening air. You think they were torturing him to make him lead them to something? It's possible. And if I'm right, the fact that they abandoned him means either they finally got what they wanted or they gave up because he wouldn't break. Rebecca finished, looking at the sleeping dog with newfound respect. Jack's investigations weren't the only development. Twice more, Rebecca spotted Robert Wilson's black truck near her property. She reported each sighting to Jack, who promised to look into it but seemed strangely reluctant to confront the man directly. "We don't have enough to bring him in yet," Jack explained when Rebecca pressed him. "Just keep documenting the incidents." Meanwhile, Animal Control, under Detective Reed's direction, had visited Rebecca's clinic 3 times looking for Ranger. Each time her staff, loyal and now fully briefed on the situation, reported that the abused dog had been transferred to a specialized rehabilitation facility in Phoenix. Rebecca knew this game of hide-and-seek couldn't continue indefinitely. Sooner or later, Reed would realize the dog wasn't at any facility in Phoenix. She needed to understand exactly what Ranger knew and why he was so important to powerful people within Prescott. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after finding Ranger, Rebecca was reviewing Matthew's case files, copies Jack had discreetly provided, when a knock at her door startled her. It was nearly 10 p.m., well past the hour for casual visitors. Ranger, who had been sleeping on his bed nearby, was instantly alert, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Easy, boy," Rebecca whispered, moving cautiously to the window. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see her elderly neighbor, Martha Johnson, standing on the porch, her thin frame illuminated by the porch light. Rebecca quickly opened the door. "Martha, is everything all right?" The older woman's face was drawn with worry. "I think someone's been watching your house, Rebecca. A black truck's been parked down by the Peterson place for over an hour." "Same one I've seen before." Rebecca ushered Martha inside, locking the door behind her. "How long have you noticed this truck?" "On and off for about a week now," Martha admitted, settling onto Rebecca's couch. Her eyes widened when she spotted Ranger. "So it's true. You did take in that poor, abused police dog." Rebecca stared at her neighbor in surprise. "How did you know he was a police dog?" Martha's weathered hands trembled slightly as she reached into her pocket, withdrawing a folded photograph. "Because I recognized him from this." The photograph showed a younger Martha standing beside a uniformed police officer with a German shepherd at his side, a healthy, proud-looking version of Ranger. "That's my son, Daniel," Martha said softly. "Daniel Matthews, and his partner, Maximus." Rebecca felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. "Officer Matthews was your son. Why didn't you say anything?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Fear, at first. After Danny died, some officers came to my house, told me it was best if I didn't ask too many questions about what happened to him, said it could put me in danger." She looked up at Rebecca, her expression hardening. "But when I saw that truck watching your house, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You saved Maximus. You deserve to know the truth." Rebecca sat beside Martha, gently taking the woman's hand. "I'm so sorry about your son. Jack, Detective Harmon, has been helping me investigate what happened. Jack's a good one, Martha nodded. One of the few Danny still trusted near the end. She looked over at Ranger, who had approached cautiously, his intelligent eyes fixed on the photograph in her hand. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. To Rebecca's astonishment, Ranger moved forward and gently rested his head on Martha's lap, the first time he had initiated contact with anyone besides Rebecca. Martha stroked his head, tears flowing freely now. "Danny knew he was in danger," Martha continued. "About a week before he died, he came to my house late at night. He was scared, Rebecca. My boy had faced down armed criminals without blinking. But that night, he was terrified. He gave me a key and told me if anything happened to him, I should wait 6 months, then give it to someone I trusted completely." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "A key to what?" "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer that way." Martha reached into her pocket again and pulled out a small key with a blue plastic cap. "I think it's time you had this." Before Rebecca could respond, Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears erect, body tense. A low growl emanated from his throat, eyes fixed on the front window. Martha froze. "The truck?" Rebecca moved swiftly to the window, carefully peering out. The black F-150 was now parked directly across from her house, headlights off. As she watched, the driver's door opened, and Robert Wilson stepped out, looking directly at her house. "Call Jack," Rebecca instructed Martha, reaching for her phone. "Tell him Wilson is here." But before she could dial, a sound from the back of the house caught her attention, breaking glass. Someone was forcing entry through her kitchen window. "They're coming in the back," Rebecca hissed, her mind racing. "Martha, take Ranger and hide in the bedroom closet. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "What about you?" Martha asked, already moving toward Ranger. "I'll handle this." Rebecca's voice changed, taking on an authority that seemed to surprise Martha. "Go, now." As Martha and Ranger disappeared into the bedroom, Rebecca quickly moved to her office, unlocking the bottom drawer of her desk. From it, she withdrew a small handgun, a Glock 19 that hadn't seen use since she'd left Chicago. She checked that it was loaded, then positioned herself in the hallway, out of sight from both the front door and kitchen. The sound of heavy footsteps in her kitchen confirmed her fears. Moments later, the front door opened as well. They were coming from both directions. "Check the bedrooms," a gruff voice ordered. "Find the dog." Rebecca steadied her breathing, waiting. When a shadow appeared in the hallway, she stepped out, gun raised. "Police, don't move." The man, young, muscular, with a shaved head and a surprised expression, froze momentarily before reaching for his waistband. "I said don't move," Rebecca repeated, her voice deadly calm. "Hands where I can see them." From the living room, Robert Wilson's voice called out, "She's bluffing, Pete. She's just a vet." "Am I?" Rebecca called back, keeping her eyes and weapon trained on the man in front of her. "Robert Wilson, you're trespassing on private property. The police are on their way." "I suggest you both leave now, before this gets worse for you." A tense silence followed, broken by the sound of approaching sirens. The man called Pete looked nervously toward the living room. "Bobby, cops are coming. We gotta go." "Not without the dog," Wilson insisted, appearing in the hallway behind Pete, a hunting knife in his hand. When he saw Rebecca's gun, he paused. "You're making a mistake, lady. You don't know what you're involved in." "I know you tortured a police dog and left him for dead," Rebecca replied evenly. "I know Officer Matthews was investigating corruption before he was killed. And I know you're going to jail for a very long time." Something flickered in Wilson's eyes, not fear or anger, but a strange desperation. "You don't understand. They have my son. They'll kill Tyler if I don't bring them the dog." Before Rebecca could process this unexpected statement, the front door burst open. Jack Harmon rushed in, weapon drawn, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Police! Drop your weapons! Hands up!" Pete immediately raised his hands, but Wilson hesitated, the knife still gripped tightly. "It's over, Robert," Jack said firmly. "Put down the knife." For a moment it seemed Wilson might resist. Then, shoulders slumping in defeat, he dropped the knife. "They'll kill my boy now," he said quietly, as the officers moved in to handcuff him. After Wilson and Pete were taken into custody, Rebecca retrieved Martha and Ranger from the bedroom. The elderly woman was visibly shaken, but unharmed. Ranger, surprisingly, seemed calmer than expected, pressing close to Martha's side protectively. "They were after Ranger," Rebecca told Jack as they sat in her kitchen, the broken window now covered with cardboard. "But Wilson said something strange. He claimed someone has his son, that they'd kill the boy if he didn't deliver Ranger to them." Jack's expression darkened. Wilson's ex-wife reported their son Tyler missing 3 months ago. Robert was the prime suspect. He'd lost custody due to a history of domestic violence. But if what he's saying is true, then someone is using his son as leverage, Rebecca finished. And that same someone probably killed Officer Matthews and tortured Ranger. Martha, who had been quietly stroking Ranger's head, looked up. "Danny always said the corruption went to the top. That's why he didn't know who to trust." Jack nodded grimly. "Crawford, it has to be." He turned to Rebecca. "You can't stay here tonight. It's not safe. I'll take you and Ranger to a safe house." "What about Martha?" Rebecca asked. "I'll have an officer take her home and post a guard," Jack assured her. "Pack what you need. We move in 15 minutes. As Rebecca gathered essentials for herself and Ranger, she reflected on the night's revelations. Martha's connection to Matthews, the key to an unknown location. Wilson's claim about his son. And most troubling, the implication that Police Chief Crawford himself might be orchestrating the entire situation. The quiet life she'd built in Prescott was unraveling rapidly, exposing the carefully constructed persona of Dr. Rebecca Anderson for the facade it was. Soon, she knew, Jack would discover the truth about her past as well. The question was whether he would still be an ally when he did. As she zipped up her bag, her hand brushed against the small key Martha had given her. Whatever Matthews had hidden, whatever information was worth killing for, she was now one step closer to finding it. And if her suspicions were correct, that discovery would either bring justice for Matthews and Ranger, or put them all in even greater danger. The safe house Jack brought them to was a small cabin nestled in the pine forests outside Prescott Valley, about 20 miles from town. As Rebecca helped Ranger from the back seat of Jack's unmarked sedan, the scent of pine and juniper filled her lungs, a stark contrast to the tension of the night's events. "It's Bureau of Land Management property," Jack explained, unlocking the cabin's front door. "Technically a ranger station, but rarely used anymore. Few people know it exists." The cabin's interior was sparse but functional. A small kitchen, a living area with a wood stove, and 2 bedrooms with simple cots. A layer of dust covered most surfaces, suggesting it had been some time since anyone had stayed there. "Not exactly the Ritz," Jack said, setting down Rebecca's bag. "But it's off the grid. No one will find you here." Rebecca helped Ranger settle onto a blanket near the wood stove while Jack checked the perimeter and secured the windows. The dog was exhausted from the stress and movement, his breathing labored, eyes half closed but vigilant. "You should get some rest," Jack suggested, returning from his security check. "We'll figure out our next move in the morning." Rebecca nodded, suddenly aware of how drained she felt. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was ebbing, leaving bone-deep fatigue in its wake. But sleep seemed impossible with so many questions swirling in her mind. "Jack," she said as he prepared to leave, "Wilson said they have his son. Who is they?" Jack paused at the door. "We'll question Wilson thoroughly tomorrow. For now, try to get some sleep. There's a radio on the kitchen counter if you need to reach me. Cell service is spotty out here. After Jack left, Rebecca sank down beside Ranger, gently stroking his head. Just you and me now, boy. What secrets are you carrying, huh? Ranger's amber eyes regarded her solemnly, as if he understood every word. Rebecca retrieved Martha's key from her pocket, turning it over in her fingers. A standard safety deposit box key with a blue plastic cap and the number 847 engraved on it, the same number that had been on Ranger's K9 tag. The coincidence couldn't be accidental. Matthews had wanted whoever found this key to make the connection to his K9 partner. "What did your handler hide, Ranger?" she whispered. Despite her exhaustion, Rebecca spent several hours reviewing the case files Jack had provided. Officer Daniel Matthews had served with the Prescott Police Department for 12 years, the last 5 with Ranger as his K9 partner. His personnel file showed commendations for drug busts, community service, and bravery in the line of duty. Nothing in his official record suggested he was investigating his fellow officers. Yet, according to Martha, her son had feared for his life in the weeks before his death. And he'd given her a key to something he believed important enough to protect with elaborate precautions. Around 2 a.m., Rebecca finally dozed off on the couch, Ranger sleeping fitfully at her feet. Her dreams were fragmented, disturbing. Chicago streets slick with rain, her parents' mangled car, a German shepherd barking frantically behind a wall of flame. She woke with a start at dawn, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Ranger was already awake, standing alertly by the cabin's front window, ears pricked forward. "What is it, boy?" Rebecca asked, moving quickly to his side. Through the window she saw Jack's car approaching along the dirt access road. She relaxed slightly, patting Ranger's head. "It's just Jack. Good boy for keeping watch." When she opened the door, however, the expression on Jack's face immediately set her on edge again. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, and there was a tightness around his eyes that suggested bad news. "What happened?" she asked, stepping aside to let him enter. Jack ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Wilson is dead." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. "What? How?" "Official report says he hanged himself in his cell last night." Jack's voice was flat with controlled anger. "Convenient, isn't it? Our prime suspect, the only person who might have information about who's behind all this, kills himself before we can properly interrogate him." "You don't believe it was suicide?" "Of course not." Jack paced the small cabin, tension radiating from his body. "I spoke with him briefly last night. He was desperate to save his son, convinced that if he cooperated with us we could help find Tyler. A man like that doesn't kill himself 8 hours later." Rebecca sank onto the couch, processing this new development. "So whoever has Wilson's son arranged to have Wilson silenced. And they have reach inside the police department jail," Jack added grimly. "Which means we can't trust anyone at the station right now." Ranger had moved to Rebecca's side, his body pressed against her leg as if offering support. She absently stroked his ears, mind racing. "What about Wilson's accomplice? Pete? Released on bail this morning, Crawford personally signed off on it, citing insufficient evidence." "That's insane. He broke into my house." "Crawford's claiming there's no proof Pete entered your property. Since the officers arrived after the fact and only Wilson was actually inside when they entered." Jack shrugged helplessly. "It's all politics and technicalities. Crawford's building a narrative that the whole thing was just Wilson acting alone, possibly delusional about his missing son." Rebecca stood abruptly, causing Ranger to startle slightly. "We need to find that safety deposit box. Matthews knew something that got him killed, and whatever evidence he collected is in that box." Jack frowned. "What safety deposit box?" Rebecca hesitated only briefly before retrieving the key Martha had given her. She'd known from the beginning that investigating Matthews' death and Ranger's torture would eventually require trusting someone. Jack had proven himself as much as anyone could. "Martha gave me this last night," she explained, showing him the key. "It belonged to her son. He gave it to her for safekeeping shortly before he was killed." Jack examined the key carefully. "First National Bank of Prescott," he murmured, recognizing the distinctive blue cap. "Box 847. He looked at Ranger, then back at the key. "Same as his K9 identification number. Clever." "Can we access it?" Rebecca asked. Jack grimaced. "Not easily. Banks require proper identification matching the box holder or a court order." He pocketed the key. "But I have a contact at First National who might help us, unofficially. Let me make some calls." While Jack stepped outside to use the radio, Rebecca tended to Ranger, changing his bandages and administering his morning medications. The dog seemed stronger today, his eyes clearer, movements more fluid despite his still healing injuries. "You're a miracle. You know that?" she told him softly. "Most animals wouldn't have survived what you went through." Ranger responded by gently licking her hand, a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Jack returned 20 minutes later. "My contact will meet us tonight after the bank closes. We'll have 15 minutes to access the box." He checked his watch. "That gives us about 10 hours to lay low. Crawford's got half the department looking for you and Ranger, by the way." "What's the official reason?" "Obstruction of justice. Apparently you're interfering with an official animal cruelty investigation by harboring evidence, namely Ranger." Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. They don't need to be. Crawford has the mayor, the DA, and most of the department in his pocket. Those who aren't directly involved are too afraid to speak up." The hours passed slowly. Rebecca and Jack reviewed Matthew's case files again, looking for anything they might have missed. Ranger alternated between resting and pacing restlessly around the cabin, clearly sensing the tension. Around noon, Jack received a call on the radio. After a brief, cryptic conversation, he turned to Rebecca, his expression grave. "That was my partner, Diane. Crawford just issued a warrant for your arrest." Rebecca stared at him. "On what charges?" "Theft of police property, obstruction of justice, and, here's the kicker, suspicion of involvement in Officer Matthews' death." "That's absurd. I wasn't even in Prescott when Matthews died." "Crawford is claiming you have a personal vendetta against the department. That you deliberately targeted Ranger as part of a plan to discredit the police." Jack's voice was tight with frustration. "It's a frame job, obviously, but it gives them legal cover to bring you in and take Ranger." Rebecca felt a cold fury building inside her. After years of careful anonymity, of building a new life far from her past, everything was crumbling around her. And now Crawford was trying to paint her as a cop killer. "It's time to stop playing defense," she said quietly, a steely resolve entering her voice. "If Crawford wants to make this personal, I can oblige." Jack studied her face, noting the change in her demeanor. "You're not just a veterinarian, are you?" he asked carefully. Rebecca held his gaze. "No, I'm not." She took a deep breath. "Before I came to Prescott, I worked for the FBI, Organized Crime Division out of Chicago." Jack didn't look as surprised as she expected. "I had my suspicions." "Your gun handling last night was too professional for a civilian. Why the career change?" "My parents were killed by a drunk driver with ties to a drug cartel we were investigating. The official ruling was accident, but I knew better." Rebecca's voice was flat, emotionless, the only way she could tell this story. "I pushed too hard for an investigation, made enemies within the Bureau. When it became clear the case would never be reopened, I resigned. Veterinary medicine had been my first career choice before the FBI recruited me from college. I went back to school, got my degree, and came here to start over. Does anyone in Prescott know about your past? Rebecca shook her head. I was careful. New identity, clean background. No one had any reason to connect Dr. Rebecca Anderson with former Special Agent Rachel Adams. Until now, Jack said grimly. Crawford must have discovered your real identity. It explains the aggressive moves to discredit you. Or he still doesn't know, and he's just trying to silence anyone asking questions about Matthews, Rebecca countered. Either way, our plan doesn't change. We need what's in that safety deposit box. Jack nodded, checking his weapon. A habitual gesture Rebecca recognized from her own days in law enforcement. We'll head into town after dark. It's safer if we... He was interrupted by Ranger's sudden change in posture. The dog was on his feet, ears forward, a low growl building in his throat as he stared at the cabin's front window. Jack and Rebecca immediately went silent, both reaching for their weapons. Through the window, Rebecca could see nothing but the surrounding pine forest and the dirt access road. Back door, Jack mouthed, gesturing for her to cover the rear exit while he moved toward the front. Rebecca positioned herself with a clear view of the cabin's back door, Ranger at her side, still growling softly. She could feel her heart pounding, old instincts resurfacing as adrenaline flooded her system. The crack of a twig outside was the only warning before gunfire erupted, bullets splintering through the cabin's wooden walls. Rebecca dropped to the floor, pulling Ranger down with her. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Jack shouted from his position by the front window, returning fire. More shots answered him, coming from multiple directions. They were surrounded. "How many?" Rebecca called out, crawling toward a better position. "At least 4 that I can see," Jack replied grimly. "Rebecca, those aren't police-issue weapons. This isn't an official raid." Understanding dawned with chilling clarity. "They're not here to arrest us." "No. They're here to kill us and take the dog." Jack fired again, then ducked as a volley of bullets shattered the window above him. "We need to get out of here. There's an old maintenance trail behind the cabin that leads deeper into the forest." "If we can reach it," Rebecca nodded, mind racing through options. "We'll need a diversion." Her eyes fell on the wood stove in the corner. "Jack, do you have any road flares in your car?" "Trunk compartment. But I can't reach the car under this gunfire." Rebecca turned to Ranger. "But he might be able to." She tore a strip from her shirt and quickly tied it around Ranger's neck. "Ranger, I need your help." The dog's intelligent eyes focused on her face, alert and waiting. "I know you're still healing, but we need those flares," she told him, unsure if he would understand, but trusting in his training. "Jack, do you have something with your scent I can use?" Jack quickly removed his watch and handed it to her. Rebecca let Ranger sniff it thoroughly, then pointed toward the back door. "Find Jack's car. Bring back what's inside." To both their amazement, Ranger seemed to understand. When Rebecca cracked open the back door between bursts of gunfire, the dog slipped out like a shadow, keeping low to the ground as he disappeared into the underbrush. "Will he actually be able to open the trunk?" Jack asked skeptically, firing another covering shot. "We're about to find out." Rebecca positioned herself to provide cover fire if Ranger reappeared. "How long until your backup arrives?" Jack's hesitation told her everything. "I didn't call for backup." Rebecca stared at him. "Why not?" "Because I don't know who I can trust," he admitted. "Crawford has too many people in his pocket. If I called this in officially, we might get help from the wrong people," Rebecca finished. "So we're on our own." The gunfire outside intensified, attackers growing bolder as they moved closer to the cabin. Rebecca and Jack returned fire strategically, trying to conserve ammunition while keeping their assailants at bay. 5 agonizing minutes passed with no sign of Ranger. Rebecca began to fear the worst, that he'd been shot or his injuries had prevented him from completing the task. Then suddenly, through the back window, she spotted movement. Ranger was racing toward the cabin, something red clutched in his mouth. "Cover me!" Rebecca called to Jack, then flung open the back door just enough for Ranger to slip through. The dog bounded in, dropping 2 road flares at her feet. Despite everything, Rebecca felt a surge of pride. "Good boy!" Jack fired several more shots, then ducked back beside Rebecca. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast. They're closing in." Working quickly, Rebecca activated both flares and positioned them near the wood stove, which she'd filled with anything flammable she could find: papers, cloth, dried pine needles from a decorative basket. When she was satisfied with the arrangement, she looked at Jack. "When this ignites, we run for the maintenance trail. The smoke and flames should give us cover." Jack nodded grimly. "On your signal." Rebecca took a deep breath, then ignited the material in the wood stove. As flames began to catch and spread, she flung the flares in different directions, one toward the front of the cabin, where it ignited a curtain, the other toward a stack of old maps and pamphlets. "Now!" she shouted as smoke began to fill the cabin. Jack flung open the back door, firing several covering shots while Rebecca and Ranger raced out into the forest. Jack followed seconds later, and together they sprinted toward the maintenance trail, keeping low and using the trees for cover. Behind them, shouts of confusion rose as their attackers noticed the smoke pouring from the cabin. The gunfire momentarily ceased, giving them precious seconds to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. The maintenance trail was little more than a deer path, overgrown and barely visible in the gathering dusk. Jack took the lead, with Rebecca following closely behind, one hand on Ranger's collar to help guide the still-recovering dog through the difficult terrain. "Who were they?" Rebecca gasped as they paused briefly to catch their breath. "Crawford's cleanup crew," Jack replied grimly. "Not official officers, mercenaries, probably ex-military. He uses them for jobs too dirty for even his corrupted cops." "You seem to know a lot about Crawford's operation," Rebecca observed, studying Jack's face in the fading light. Something flickered in Jack's eyes, guilt, perhaps, or resignation. I was part of it once." The confession hung in the air between them, alongside the distant sound of pursuit resuming in the forest behind them. "We need to keep moving," Jack said, avoiding her gaze. "There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles further along this trail. If we can reach it before full dark." Rebecca nodded, processing this new revelation about Jack, even as they continued their flight through the deepening shadows of the pine forest. The man she'd been trusting with her life had just admitted to being part of Crawford's corruption. The question now was whether his apparent change of heart was genuine or just another layer of deception in a case where nothing was as it seemed. As night fell over the Arizona forest, 3 figures moved silently through the darkness: a disgraced FBI agent turned veterinarian, a detective with a shadowed past, and a wounded police dog carrying secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. Behind them, the cabin blazed like a beacon, illuminating armed men spreading out into the forest. The hunt had begun in earnest, and morning seemed very far away. They reached the hunting cabin well after midnight, a ramshackle structure nearly invisible among the ponderosa pines. Jack led them around to the back, where he retrieved a key from beneath a hollow log. A hiding place so obvious, Rebecca winced. "Locals all know about this place," Jack explained, noting her expression as he unlocked the door. "But they respect the unwritten code. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't ask questions. Don't get involved." "Small-town ethics," Rebecca murmured. "Seems to be failing Prescott lately." The cabin's interior was a single room with basic amenities: wood stove, rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow cot, and shelves stocked with canned goods and emergency supplies. Jack moved efficiently, checking the perimeter before closing the heavy curtains over the windows. "We should be safe here for a few hours," he said, lighting a kerosene lamp that cast long shadows across the wooden walls. Crawford's men will be searching the main trails, not these old hunting paths. Rebecca helped Ranger settle on a threadbare rug near the stove. The dog was exhausted. His breathing labored from the strenuous escape through the forest. Several of his wounds had reopened, blood seeping through the bandages. She rummaged through her backpack for the emergency medical supplies she'd hastily packed. "You said you were part of it," she said, not looking at Jack as she tended to Ranger. "Crawford's corruption. Tell me." Jack sat heavily in one of the chairs, his gun resting on the table before him. In the amber lamplight, the lines on his face seemed deeper, his eyes shadowed with something beyond physical exhaustion. "I was Crawford's protege when I joined the force 8 years ago," he began, his voice low. "Ambitious, eager to prove myself. Crawford took a special interest in me, mentored me, promoted me faster than normal. I was flattered, thought I'd earned it." Rebecca continued cleaning Ranger's wounds, her hands gentle but her attention fixed on Jack's words. "3 years in, Crawford invited me to join a special task force focusing on drug trafficking, said it was elite, off the books, needed men he could trust." Jack's laugh was hollow. "I believed him. Believed we were doing important work that required bending rules occasionally. The lines get blurry when you're a cop, you know. Means and ends." "When did you realize what was really happening?" "Gradually, then suddenly." Jack ran a hand over his face. "Small things at first. Evidence that disappeared, suspects released without explanation, cash that never made it to the evidence room. I told myself there were reasonable explanations. Until there weren't," Rebecca supplied. Jack nodded. "Matthews was the turning point. He was old school, incorruptible. When he started asking questions about discrepancies in seized drug amounts, Crawford got nervous. I was in the meeting when Crawford decided Matthews needed to be handled." "You were there when they planned his murder?" Rebecca's voice sharpened, her hands momentarily stilling their work on Ranger's bandages. "No!" Jack's denial was immediate, vehement. "Crawford just said Matthews needed to back off or face consequences. I thought he meant demotion, maybe forced retirement. I never imagined." He trailed off, eyes haunted. "The night Matthews died, I was deliberately assigned across town. When I heard what happened, I knew. But by then, I was already implicated in enough of Crawford's operations that coming forward would have meant prison for me too." Rebecca resumed her care of Ranger, digesting Jack's confession. "So you stayed silent. Let Matthews' killers walk free." "I was a coward," Jack admitted quietly. "But I also started gathering evidence, carefully, slowly, building a case against Crawford and the others. I needed something concrete, something undeniable before I could go to the FBI or state police. And then Ranger appeared. Yes. When I heard about a severely abused German Shepherd found near town, something clicked. Matthew's K-9 partner had supposedly died with him, but no body was ever recovered. I thought if I could connect the dog to Matthews, prove he was alive, it would unravel the official narrative of Matthew's death," Rebecca finished. "But why involve me? Why not handle it yourself?" Jack met her gaze directly. "Because Crawford watches everything I do. I needed someone outside the department, someone with skills but no obvious connection to the case." A faint smile touched his lips. A veterinarian with a mysterious past and a habit of taking in hopeless cases seemed perfect. "So you manipulated me," Rebecca stated flatly. "I pointed you in a direction. You chose to walk the path." Jack leaned forward. "And I think you were looking for something like this long before Ranger showed up. Something that would matter, that would let you use the skills you've kept buried." Rebecca couldn't deny the truth in his words. The quiet life she'd built in Prescott had been peaceful but hollow, a deliberate numbing of the parts of herself that had once defined her. "We need to access that safety deposit box," she said instead of acknowledging his point. "Matthews collected evidence against Crawford. That's what got him killed, and it's what's in that box. And it's what they'll be guarding now, Jack warned. My contact at the bank was taking a risk agreeing to meet us after hours. After today's events, Crawford will have people watching the bank. So we changed the plan. Rebecca finished securing Ranger's fresh bandages and moved to sit opposite Jack at the table. Instead of sneaking in after hours, we walked through the front door during business hours. Jack's eyebrows rose. With an arrest warrant out for you and every cop in Prescott looking for that dog, that's suicide. Not if we have leverage. Rebecca's mind was working rapidly now, old instincts reawakening. Crawford wants Ranger badly enough to send armed men after us. Why? What does he think the dog can do? Find whatever Matthews hid, probably. Canines like Ranger are sometimes trained to respond to specific locations or scents that only their handlers know about. Rebecca looked thoughtfully at Ranger, who was watching them with alert eyes, despite his exhaustion. So Crawford believes Ranger can lead them to evidence Matthews hid somewhere else. Evidence not in the safety deposit box. Possibly, Jack agreed. But if that were true, why didn't they get Ranger to find it during the months they had him captive? A chill ran through Rebecca as the pieces aligned in her mind. Because Ranger wouldn't cooperate. That's why he was tortured. They were trying to break him, to force him to lead them to whatever Matthews hid. Jack's eyes widened with realization, and they eventually gave up. That's why they abandoned him. They thought he was useless to them. Or they got what they wanted, Rebecca countered. Wilson said they'd kill his son if he didn't deliver Ranger to them. Why would they still want the dog if they'd already found what Matthews hid? Because there's more than one hidden location, Jack suggested. Matthews was thorough. He probably scattered evidence in multiple places, insurance against exactly what happened to him. Rebecca turned toward Ranger. What do you know, boy? What are you hiding from them? The German shepherd's ears perked forward, his intelligent eyes fixed on Rebecca's face. For a moment, the cabin was silent except for the soft crackle of the fire Jack had built in the wood stove. We need to think like Matthews, Rebecca said finally. He knew he was in danger. He gave his mother a safety deposit box key and told her to wait 6 months before passing it on. Why 6 months? Jack frowned in concentration. Maybe he knew that's how long it would take for whoever killed him to let their guard down, or maybe that's when something would happen automatically, Rebecca finished, excitement entering her voice. Banks have policies for abandoned safety deposit boxes. If fees aren't paid for a certain period, they drill the box and inventory the contents, Jack said, catching her train of thought. Which would become part of public record. Exactly. Matthews knew that if he died, the safety deposit box would eventually be opened officially. Whatever is inside would become known. Rebecca drummed her fingers on the table. But he also gave his mother the key and specific instructions. He wanted someone he trusted to access the box before that happened. Which means there must be something time-sensitive inside, Jack concluded. Something that loses value or meaning if it's not acted upon quickly. Rebecca stood and began to pace, energy coursing through her despite the night's exertions. We need to get into that bank tomorrow, arrest warrant or not. And how exactly do we do that without getting arrested or killed? By giving Crawford what he wants, partly. Rebecca paused, looking down at Ranger. We offer a trade, access to the safety deposit box in exchange for Wilson's son. Jack stared at her. You want to negotiate with Crawford? The man just tried to have us killed. Not directly with Crawford. We use intermediaries. Create a situation he can't control with violence without exposing himself. Rebecca's mind was racing through scenarios, evaluating angles like she'd been trained to do at Quantico. We need to get Martha Johnson to the bank tomorrow. As Matthew's next of kin, she has legal right to access his safety deposit box with proper documentation. Crawford will have her watched too, Jack pointed out. Counting on it. We need witnesses, Jack. Lots of them. Citizens, bank employees, people Crawford can't control or silence. Rebecca's eyes gleamed with determination. We're going to force this into the open where he can't use his usual tactics. Jack was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. It's risky. If Crawford feels cornered, he might decide to burn everything down rather than face exposure. That's why we need insurance. Rebecca knelt beside Ranger, gently stroking his head. And I think our friend here is the key to that too. They spent the next hour formulating a plan. Contingencies, backup contingencies. The hunter's cabin had no phone, but Jack had a radio with limited range. Shortly before dawn, he made a coded call to the one person in the department he still trusted completely, his partner, Detective Diane Sawyer. She'll contact Martha, arrange the bank meeting, Jack explained after completing the brief, cryptic conversation. And she'll reach out to someone at the Arizona State Police, unofficially. Can she be trusted? Rebecca asked bluntly. With my life, Jack replied without hesitation. Diane and Matthews were close friends. She's been helping my investigation from the shadows, but she's been smart enough to keep Crawford from suspecting her. Rebecca nodded, accepting his assessment. She checked Ranger's condition one final time before they attempted a few hours of rest. The dog's wounds were stable, his breathing more regular. Despite everything he'd been through, his eyes remained alert, watchful, the eyes of a guardian who understood more than most humans gave him credit for. We're going to finish what your partner started, she told him softly, resting her forehead briefly against his. I promise you that. As dawn broke over the Arizona forest, Rebecca allowed herself a few hours of fitful sleep, one hand resting on her gun, the other on Ranger's warm flank. Jack took the first watch, his silhouette by the window a reminder of how precarious their situation remained. Their plan had too many variables, too many potential points of failure. But as Rebecca drifted between consciousness and sleep, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. The hollow existence she'd constructed in Prescott had been shattered, revealing the person she'd tried to leave behind. A woman who knew how to fight, who understood that justice sometimes required walking through fire. For Daniel Matthews, for Martha, for Tyler Wilson, for Ranger, and perhaps, finally, for her own parents, Rebecca would see this through, whatever the cost. The dream came to her just before Jack woke her for her watch shift, vivid, jarring. She was back in Chicago, standing at her parents' graves, but she wasn't alone. Daniel Matthews stood beside her, a German shepherd at his heel. The truth doesn't stay buried forever, Matthews told her, his face solemn. Not if the right people keep digging. Rebecca woke with a start, the dream's clarity unsettling. As she took her position by the window, watching the forest lighten with dawn, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided by something beyond themselves, that Matthews had set this path in motion long before any of them understood what was happening. By mid-morning, they were ready to move. The plan required precise timing and more than a little luck. Jack would approach the bank first, making contact with his inside person to ensure everything was prepared. Martha, accompanied by Diane, would arrive at exactly 11:15, when the bank was typically at its busiest. Rebecca and Ranger would remain hidden until the critical moment. If all went according to plan, they would access the safety deposit box, secure whatever evidence Matthews had left behind, and force Crawford into the open where his power was limited. If the plan failed, Rebecca pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option, not with so many lives hanging in the balance. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Rebecca knelt beside Ranger one last time. Today we finish this, she told him, looking into those intelligent eyes. Your partner would be proud of you, you know. You never broke, never led them to what they wanted. That's a special kind of loyalty. Ranger pressed his muzzle against her hand, a gesture that felt like both acknowledgement and promise. Together, they stepped out into the morning light, ready for whatever the day would bring. Jack paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back at the cabin that had sheltered them through the night. "Whatever happens at the bank today," he said quietly, "I need you to know I'm sorry for the part I played in all this, not just for involving you, but for being a coward when Matthews needed allies." Rebecca studied his face, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. "Redemption isn't a single act, Jack. It's a path. You're walking it now. That counts for something." With that, they began the journey back toward Prescott, where the final act of Daniel Matthews' legacy awaited them. Behind them, the hunting cabin stood silent in the morning light, keeper of secrets and confessions that would shape whatever came next. First National Bank of Prescott stood in the heart of downtown, a two-story sandstone building with classical columns flanking its entrance, a deliberate architectural reminder of stability and permanence. At 11:07 a.m., Rebecca watched from the alley across the street as Jack entered through the front doors, moving with the casual confidence of a man with nothing to hide. Ranger sat beside her in the shadow of a dumpster, his body tense but steady, bandages hidden beneath a police K9 vest Jack had procured from his partner Diane. "Just a few more minutes," Rebecca whispered, scratching behind Ranger's good ear. The dog's attention never wavered from the bank entrance, as if he understood exactly what was at stake. The morning had gone according to plan so far. They'd hitched a ride to the outskirts of town with a logging truck driver who asked no questions about the woman and dog hiding in his cab. From there, Diane had picked them up and driven them to this observation point, providing them with updates on Martha's preparations and Crawford's movements. "Crawford called an emergency meeting with his inner circle at 10 a.m., Diane had reported. "Something's got him spooked. He's pulled officers from regular duties to search for you two." "Good," Rebecca had replied. "The more resources he commits to finding us, the fewer he'll have available at the bank." Now, as the minute hand on the courthouse clock across the square ticked closer to 11:15, Rebecca reviewed the plan one final time in her mind. Martha would arrive with Diane, presenting herself as Matthew's next of kin with right of access to his safety deposit box. The bank manager, Jack's contact, would verify her identity and escort her to the vault. Meanwhile, Rebecca and Ranger would enter through the employee entrance at the rear of the building, using the key Diane had provided. If all went perfectly, they would converge at the vault, access box 847, and secure whatever evidence Matthews had hidden there before Crawford realized what was happening. Nothing ever goes perfectly, the voice of her old FBI instructor whispered in her mind. At exactly 11:13, a police cruiser pulled up in front of the bank. Rebecca tensed, then relaxed as she recognized Diane stepping out, helping Martha from the passenger seat. The elderly woman looked frail but determined, clutching her purse with white-knuckled hands as they ascended the bank steps. "That's our cue," Rebecca murmured to Ranger. "Ready, partner?" They moved swiftly across the alley to the bank's rear entrance. The service door opened with Diane's key, admitting them to a narrow hallway lined with lockers and time cards. Rebecca had memorized the building's layout from blueprints Jack had provided, left at the end of this corridor, through the break room, then down the stairs to the lower level where the vault was located. The few bank employees they encountered barely glanced at them. A woman in professional clothing accompanied by a dog in a K9 vest projected an authority that people seldom questioned. Rebecca moved with purpose, her expression conveying that she belonged exactly where she was. They reached the stairs without incident and descended to the lower level. The temperature dropped noticeably, the air taking on the slightly metallic quality common to secure areas. At the bottom of the stairs, Rebecca paused, listening. Voices echoed from around the corner. Martha's tremulous tones, the more confident responses of a man who must be the bank manager, and Jack's measured contribution to the conversation. Rebecca gave Ranger the hand signal for quiet that Jack had taught her, then eased forward to the corner. A quick glance showed exactly what she'd hoped to see. Martha seated at a small desk with Jack standing beside her, the bank manager unlocking the heavy door to the vault. No sign of Crawford's people, yet. The bank manager, a slim man with prematurely white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked up as Rebecca rounded the corner with Ranger. His eyes widened momentarily, then he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Dr. Anderson," he said quietly. "Mr. Harmon said you might be joining us." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Phillips," Rebecca replied, reading his nameplate. "I'm just following proper procedure for next-of-kin access," he said carefully, glancing at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. "Mrs. Johnson has provided adequate identification and documentation of her relationship to Officer Matthews." Martha reached out a trembling hand to Ranger, tears welling in her eyes as the dog gently nuzzled her palm. "He looks so much better," she whispered. "Danny would be so grateful for what you've done for his partner." The vault door swung open with the deep, satisfying sound of precision machinery. Mr. Phillips led them into a room lined with metal deposit boxes of various sizes, their brass numbers gleaming under the fluorescent lighting. "Box 847 is this way," he said, moving toward the far wall. "Mrs. Johnson, as the authorized next of kin, you'll need to sign here before I can access the box." Martha signed the registry with a shaky hand, then followed Phillips to a box in the middle of the wall. He inserted his master key, then gestured for Martha to use the key she'd provided, the one she'd passed to Rebecca, who had returned it that morning. The box slid out smoothly, and Phillips placed it on a small table in a private viewing room adjacent to the vault. "Take as much time as you need," he said. "I'll be just outside. Standard procedure requires that I remain nearby, but I'll give you privacy." When the door closed behind him, the four of them, Rebecca, Jack, Martha, and Ranger, stared at the safety deposit box for a long moment, as if reluctant to disturb the final message from a dead man. "Go ahead, Martha," Jack said gently. "He meant for you to find this." With trembling fingers, Martha lifted the lid. Inside lay a sealed manila envelope, a USB drive, a small leather-bound notebook, and a child's drawing in crayon. A stick figure police officer beside a brown dog, the wobbly signature reading, "Tyler." "Tyler Wilson," Rebecca breathed, picking up the drawing. "Matthews was investigating him before he died." "Not investigating," Martha corrected, opening the notebook. "Protecting. Danny wrote about it here. He writes here that if I'm reading this, he's dead, and I should take everything to the FBI field office in Phoenix, not the local police." Rebecca examined the USB drive. "This probably contains digital evidence, recordings, financial records, whatever else he collected." "It's more than enough to open a federal investigation," Jack said, relief evident in his voice. "Crawford's finished." A sudden bark from Ranger shattered the moment. The dog was facing the door, ears forward, body rigid with alertness. "Someone's coming," Rebecca warned, gathering the evidence and shoving it into her jacket pockets. "Martha, stay behind me." The door swung open, but instead of Mr. Phillips, Police Chief William Crawford stood in the doorway, flanked by Detective Reed and another officer Rebecca didn't recognize. All three had their weapons drawn. "Well, well," Crawford said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "Dr. Anderson, Detective Harmon, Mrs. Matthews, and the famous missing K9. How convenient to find you all in one place." "Chief Crawford," Jack said evenly, "we were just examining evidence in an ongoing investigation." "The only investigation here is into Dr. Anderson's theft of police property and obstruction of justice," Crawford replied, gesturing toward Ranger. "And your own insubordination, Detective." Rebecca positioned herself protectively in front of Martha. "We know everything, Crawford, about Matthews, about Wilson's son, about your drug operation. It's over." Something dangerous flashed in Crawford's eyes. but his smile remained fixed. "I don't know what fantasy you've constructed, Dr. Anderson, but I assure you—" "William Crawford," a new voice interrupted from behind the chief. "You are under arrest for the murder of Officer Daniel Matthews, corruption, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy." Crawford whirled to find Detective Diane Sawyer standing in the vault doorway, her weapon trained on him. Behind her stood 4 officers in the distinctive uniform of the Arizona State Police. "Lower your weapons," the lead state trooper ordered Crawford and his men. Slowly. For a moment, Rebecca thought Crawford would resist. His face contorted with rage, his knuckles white around his gun. Then, with a deliberate movement that sent chills down Rebecca's spine, he turned his weapon toward Martha. "Nobody moves," he snarled. "Or Matthew's mother joins her son." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ranger, with a speed belying his injuries, launched himself at Crawford's arm. Rebecca lunged for Martha, pulling the elderly woman to the floor. Jack tackled Detective Reed. A gunshot echoed deafeningly in the confined space of the viewing room, then another. When Rebecca looked up from where she'd shielded Martha with her body, she saw Crawford on the ground, Ranger standing over him, teeth fastened on his wrist. The police chief's gun had skittered across the floor. Blood pooled beneath him from a wound in his shoulder where one of the state troopers had shot him. "Don't move!" the state trooper shouted, his weapon still trained on Crawford. "Next one goes through your head." Reed and the other officer had been subdued by Jack and Diane. The viewing room was suddenly crowded with state police securing the scene and taking Crawford and his men into custody. "Martha, are you hurt?" Rebecca asked urgently, helping the shaking woman to a sitting position. "I'm all right," Martha assured her, though her face was pale with shock. "Just a bit rattled. Is Ranger okay?" Rebecca turned to check on the dog, who had released Crawford's wrist at a command from one of the state troopers, and now stood vigilantly nearby, his intelligent eyes never leaving the fallen police chief. "He's fine," Rebecca said, relief flooding through her. "Better than fine. He's a hero." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, evidence processing, and medical checks. The state police had been secretly investigating Crawford for months, it emerged, but it lacked the concrete evidence needed for an arrest. Jack's partner, Diane, had been their inside contact, feeding them information while maintaining her cover in Crawford's department. "We were close," the state police captain told Rebecca as paramedics treated a minor cut she'd received during the scuffle. "But what you found in that safety deposit box gives us everything we need to dismantle Crawford's entire operation." "What about Tyler Wilson?" Rebecca asked. "Robert Wilson's son?" "SWAT team is raiding a property outside town as we speak," the captain replied, "based on the coordinates in Matthew's notes. The boy should be safely recovered within the hour." By late afternoon, Rebecca, Jack, Martha, and Ranger had been moved to the Prescott Police Department, which was now under the temporary command of the state police. The building buzzed with activity as officers loyal to Crawford were identified and detained, while those who had been coerced or remained clean were debriefed. Rebecca sat in a quiet corner of the conference room, Ranger's head resting on her lap. The dog's eyes were half closed with exhaustion, but he refused to fully sleep, still maintaining his protective watch. "He's not going to let you out of his sight," Jack observed, sitting down beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Can you blame him?" Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully. "After everything he's been through, trust doesn't come easily." Jack's phone buzzed. He checked the message, a smile breaking across his tired face. "They found Tyler Wilson. He's safe, a bit malnourished and scared, but physically unharmed." "Thank God," Rebecca breathed. "At least something good comes out of all this." "A lot of good," Jack corrected. "Crawford's going away for life. His drug operation is being dismantled as we speak. Matthews gets justice. and the department can start rebuilding without corruption at its core. Rebecca nodded, absently stroking Ranger's ears. "What happens to him now?" she asked softly. Jack hesitated. "Technically, he's still department property. But given the circumstances," he shrugged, "I think arrangements could be made for him to retire with a certain veterinarian who saved his life." "I'd like that," Rebecca admitted, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The bond forged with Ranger through danger and healing had become something she couldn't imagine severing. A state police officer appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Anderson." "There's a federal agent here to see you." Rebecca tensed, her hand stilling on Ranger's head. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the inevitable collision of her past and present lives. The man who entered was familiar. Special Agent Thomas Reeves, her former supervisor at the FBI. He'd aged in the years since she'd seen him, gray now prominent in his dark hair, lines deeper around his eyes. "Agent Adams," he said, using her former name. "Or should I say, Dr. Anderson." "Reeves," she acknowledged, not rising from her seat. "I'm not an agent anymore." "So I gathered." He pulled up a chair, studying her with the penetrating gaze she remembered all too well. "You've been busy." "Just doing what needed to be done." Reeves glanced at Ranger, then at Jack, who was watching the interaction warily. "Would you mind giving us a moment, Detective?" "Actually, I would," Jack replied evenly. "Anything you have to say to Dr. Anderson can be said in front of me." A flicker of respect showed in Reeves's eyes. "Fair enough." He turned back to Rebecca. "The Bureau has been building a case against Crawford for over a year. Your involvement complicates things." "Because I'm a former agent who disappeared under a cloud of suspicion?" Rebecca asked bluntly. "Partly," Reeves admitted, "but mostly because you accessed evidence and conducted what amounts to a vigilante investigation outside official channels." "I saved a dog's life," Rebecca corrected. "Everything else flowed from that." Reeves studied her for a long moment. "Your parents' case," he said finally. "You always believed there was more to the accident than what the official investigation found." "I know there was," Rebecca replied, a familiar anger stirring within her. "The driver had ties to the Salazar cartel, the same cartel our task force was investigating. That wasn't coincidence." "No," Reeves said quietly. "It wasn't." Rebecca stared at him, the implications of his simple agreement sending shockwaves through her system. "You knew?" "Not then. Later, after you'd already resigned and disappeared." Reeves looked genuinely regretful. "By the time we uncovered the connection, you were gone. Rachel Adams had vanished, and Rebecca Anderson had taken her place. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because we've finally built the case you wanted us to build 5 years ago. The Salazar cartel is being dismantled as we speak, including the individuals responsible for your parents' death." Reeves leaned forward. "And because I want to offer you your job back." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca felt Jack stiffen beside her, but her own reaction surprised her. Instead of the vindication or triumph she might once have expected to feel, she experienced only a quiet certainty that her path lay elsewhere. "I'm not that person anymore, Reeves," she said finally. "I found something here in Prescott, something real." "Hiding in a small town, pretending to be something you're not?" Reeves challenged. "Finding peace," Rebecca corrected. "Building a life that helps rather than hunts. Healing instead of hurting." She rested her hand on Ranger's head. "I'm good at what I do now. It matters." Reeves studied her, then nodded slowly. "The official position of the Bureau will be that you were operating as an unofficial consultant in our Crawford investigation. Your record will be cleared and your pension reinstated. What you do with that fresh start is up to you. Thank you, Rebecca said, genuinely surprised by the gesture. Don't thank me yet, Reeves warned, standing. There will still be depositions, court appearances, paperwork. Crawford will go to trial and you'll be a key witness. He handed her a card. We'll be in touch. After he left, Jack released a breath he seemed to have been holding. Former FBI agent, huh? You might have mentioned that earlier. Would you have believed me? Rebecca asked with a hint of a smile. Probably not, he conceded. So, what now? Back to Chicago and the FBI? Rebecca looked down at Ranger, who gazed back at her with complete trust in his amber eyes. She thought about her clinic, about Martha, who would need support in the coming months, about the life she'd built here that had begun as a cover but had somehow become real along the way. No, she said with quiet certainty. My place is here now. She scratched behind Ranger's ear, earning a contented sigh from the dog. Our place is here. Outside the police station, reporters had gathered, hungry for details about the corruption scandal that had rocked Prescott. The story would dominate headlines for weeks. The crooked police chief, the murdered officer, the tortured K-9 who helped bring down a criminal empire, and the veterinarian who saved him. But for Rebecca, sitting quietly with Ranger as the sun set over the Arizona mountains, the headlines mattered less than the simple truth they had uncovered. That loyalty, once given, could withstand the darkest torture. That justice, though delayed, could still arrive. And that even the most broken spirits, human or canine, could find healing in unexpected places. The road ahead would not be easy. Crawford's trial loomed, and the wounds Ranger had suffered would leave permanent scars. Yet as the German shepherd rested his head trustingly on her lap, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had driven her FBI career, but something steadier and more sustaining. The quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months after the arrest of William Crawford, Prescott was healing. The spring air carried the scent of blooming wildflowers and new beginnings. As Rebecca pulled into the parking lot of Small Paws Veterinary Clinic, the morning sun glinted off the new sign above the entrance. Small Paws K-9 Rehabilitation Center. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, his once matted coat now glossy and full. The physical scars of his torture faded to pale lines visible only when the light caught them just so. The psychological scars remained. He still startled at loud noises, still grew anxious when Rebecca was out of sight. But those too were healing with time and patience. Ready for work, partner? Rebecca asked, grabbing her bag from the back seat. Ranger's tail wagged in response, his amber eyes bright with anticipation. The custom-made vest he wore identified him as a therapy dog, a role he had embraced with the same dedication he'd once given to police work. Inside the clinic, the waiting room was already filled, a testament to the practice's growth over the past months. What had begun as Rebecca's small veterinary clinic had expanded to include specialized care for traumatized animals and a unique program pairing troubled youth with rescued dogs. "Morning, Dr. Anderson," called Lily from behind the reception desk. "Your 9 o'clock is already here, and Martha called to confirm she'll bring the cookies for today's therapy group." "Thanks, Lily." Rebecca smiled, scanning the appointment book. "Is Dr. Thompson with the new rescue yet?" "In exam room 2. He says this one's going to need your special touch." Rebecca nodded, making her way to the back of the clinic with Ranger at her heel. What had once been a storage room was now a specialized rehabilitation space, complete with hydrotherapy equipment, obstacle courses for rebuilding strength, and quiet corners where traumatized animals could feel safe. Dr. Samuel Thompson, once her mentor, now her partner in the expanded practice, looked up as she entered. On the exam table sat a small pit bull mix, one leg missing, eyes wary but not defeated. "Meet Chance," Sam said, gently stroking the dog's head. Found chained in an abandoned lot. Animal control brought him in last night. Rebecca approached slowly, letting the dog see and smell her before making contact. "Hello, Chance," she said softly. "Tough break, huh? But you're in the right place now." As if understanding her words, the pit bull's tail gave a tentative wag. "I think he'll be perfect for the program," Sam suggested, "once he's healed physically." Rebecca nodded, already envisioning which of their young clients might connect with this resilient survivor. "Let's get him settled in the recovery ward. Ranger can show him the ropes." The morning passed in a blur of routine appointments, surgeries, and rehabilitation sessions. By noon, Rebecca was ready for a break. She found herself, as she often did these days, sitting on the bench outside the clinic, sharing a sandwich with Ranger while watching the quiet streets of Prescott. "Mind if I join you?" Rebecca looked up to find Jack standing before her, a brown paper bag in hand. In the 6 months since Crawford's arrest, Jack had been instrumental in rebuilding the Prescott Police Department. As interim chief, a position that had recently been made permanent, he had implemented strict anti-corruption measures and fostered new community engagement initiatives. "Please," she said, shifting to make room. "Court day today, right?" Jack nodded, unwrapping his own lunch. "Sentencing for Reed and the others. Crawford's trial is still months away. His lawyers keep filing motions for delays." "Typical," Rebecca sighed. She had already testified before the grand jury that had indicted Crawford on multiple counts of murder, corruption, drug trafficking, and kidnapping. The former police chief was facing life in prison without parole. "How's the kid doing?" she asked, referring to Tyler Wilson. "Better every day," Jack replied, offering a piece of his turkey sandwich to Ranger, who accepted it with gentle dignity. "His aunt has temporary custody while his mother completes rehab. He's been asking about visiting Ranger again." Rebecca smiled, remembering the emotional reunion 3 months ago when Tyler had first come to the clinic. The boy had immediately recognized Ranger as the dog from his father's photos, and Ranger had responded with uncharacteristic enthusiasm, licking the child's face while his tail wagged furiously. "Bring him by any time," she said. "Ranger loves him, and it seems to help Tyler process everything that happened." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as Prescott went about its day. The town had been rocked by Crawford's arrest and the subsequent revelations about corruption within its police force, but communities, like individuals, possessed remarkable resilience. "I got a call from Agent Reeves this morning," Jack mentioned casually. "The Salazar cartel case is officially closed. They've arrested everyone involved in your parents' death." Rebecca nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing through her. "He called me too, offered me a chance to meet the man who was driving the car that night." She shook her head. "I turned him down." Jack looked surprised. "You've spent years wanting justice for that. You don't want to look him in the eye?" "I've made my peace with it," Rebecca said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. "Knowing they're facing consequences is enough. I don't need to confront him to move forward anymore." Jack studied her face, then nodded slowly. "You've changed. We all have." She glanced at Ranger, who was alertly watching a squirrel scamper up a nearby tree. "Some more dramatically than others." After lunch, Rebecca returned to find Martha Johnson arranging cookies on a platter in the clinic's community room. At 79, Martha had found renewed purpose in helping with the therapy program, her natural, grandmotherly warmth providing comfort to both animals and children. "Those look delicious," Rebecca commented, eyeing the homemade chocolate chip cookies. "My Danny's favorite recipe," Martha replied with a soft smile. The grief of losing her son would never fully disappear, but in recent months it had been tempered by the justice served and the community that had rallied around her. The children should be arriving any minute. As if on cue, the front door chimed and voices filled the waiting room, the afternoon therapy group arriving from Prescott Middle School. 6 students, selected for various challenges ranging from behavioral issues to trauma recovery, filed into the community room with their counselor. Dr. Anderson, a gangly 13-year-old named Miguel, rushed toward Ranger, dropping to his knees to greet the dog at eye level, as Rebecca had taught them. "Did you get my essay about canine training? I got an A." "I did, Miguel. It was excellent," Rebecca affirmed. "In fact, I've been thinking you might be ready to help with Chance, our new rescue." The boy's face lit up at the prospect of additional responsibility. 6 months ago, he had been on the verge of expulsion for fighting. Now, under the structured guidance of the therapy program, he was showing leadership qualities and a remarkable empathy for injured animals. The session proceeded as usual, a combination of animal care education, hands-on interaction with the therapy dogs, and group discussion facilitated by the school counselor. Rebecca watched with quiet pride as Ranger moved among the children, somehow knowing which ones needed gentle encouragement and which needed playful distraction. "He's a natural therapist," observed the school counselor as they watched Ranger rest his head on the lap of a particularly withdrawn girl who tentatively began to stroke his ears. "He understands suffering," Rebecca replied simply, "and the importance of compassion." After the children departed, laden with Martha's cookies and assignments to complete before the next session, Rebecca began closing up the clinic for the day. As she was filing the last of the paperwork, her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Turn on Channel 12 News." Curious, she switched on the small television in the break room. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen sent a jolt through her. "Former Prescott Police Chief William Crawford found dead in prison cell." The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Apparent suicide, according to prison officials. Crawford, who was awaiting trial on multiple charges including murder and corruption, was found hanging in his cell during routine checks this morning. Sources close to the investigation report that Crawford left a detailed confession implicating several additional co-conspirators in his criminal enterprise. We'll bring you more details as they become available." Rebecca sank into a chair, absorbing the news. Crawford's death brought no joy, only a somber sense that a dark chapter was closing. She thought of Daniel Matthews, whose meticulous gathering of evidence had ultimately brought Crawford's empire crashing down, though he hadn't lived to see justice served. Her phone rang. "Jack." "You seeing this?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," she confirmed. "Suicide? Really?" "That's the official story," Jack replied, his tone suggesting skepticism. "But Crawford had powerful connections even behind bars, people who might prefer he never testify." "Either way, it's over," Rebecca said, watching as the news switched to footage of Crawford being led into court, his face a mask of defiance. "What about these other co-conspirators he supposedly named?" "I've got a meeting with the FBI and state police in an hour. I'll know more then." Jack paused. "You doing okay with this?" The question surprised her. "I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because closure isn't always what we expect it to be," he answered simply. After hanging up, Rebecca completed her closing routine, then collected Ranger for the drive home. The German Shepherd seemed to sense her thoughtful mood, pressing close to her side as they walked to the car. Her small ranch house on the outskirts of town had undergone its own transformation in recent months. The spare bedroom that had once served as Ranger's recovery space was now a proper guest room, while the living room featured a custom-built dog bed beside her favorite reading chair. Photos adorned the walls, not just of her parents now, but new memories. Ranger's official retirement ceremony from the K-9 unit, the ribbon cutting for the rehabilitation center, holiday dinner with Martha, Jack, and Diane. As sunset painted the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Rebecca sat on her porch swing with Ranger at her feet, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From that first day when she'd found him near death, through the dangers they'd faced together, to this quiet moment of peace, it seemed almost miraculous. Her contemplation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel, Jack's SUV pulled into her driveway, followed by another vehicle, Diane's sedan with Martha in the passenger seat and a small figure in the back. "Hope you don't mind company," Jack called as he approached the porch. "Thought you might like to hear the latest developments in person." And Tyler really wanted to see Ranger. 10-year-old Tyler Wilson scrambled out of the car, his face alight with excitement. "Dr. Rebecca, is Ranger here?" At the sound of the boy's voice, Ranger's ears perked up. He rose and moved to the porch steps, tail wagging in greeting. "Ranger!" Tyler wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the thick fur. Ranger stood patiently, allowing the embrace with dignified affection. "I'll put coffee on," Rebecca offered, leading the adults inside while Tyler remained on the porch with Ranger, already telling the dog about his day at school. In the kitchen, Jack briefed Rebecca and Martha on the meeting he'd just left. Crawford's confession had implicated several high-ranking officials in neighboring counties, as well as a state judge and 2 prominent businessmen. The corruption had spread further than anyone had suspected. "It's like pulling on a loose thread," Diane observed, accepting the mug of coffee Rebecca handed her. "The whole sweater keeps unraveling." "But it means Daniel's work wasn't in vain," Martha said quietly. "Even in death, my boy is still bringing criminals to justice." Through the window they could see Tyler and Ranger playing a gentle game of tug-of-war on the lawn, the boys' laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "Robert Wilson would be proud," Jack commented, following Rebecca's gaze. "His son is safe, and the people who threatened his family are facing justice." "It's strange to think it all started with a dying dog in a shed," Rebecca mused. "If Pete Dawson hadn't called me that day, you'd have found another way to make a difference," Jack assured her. "It's who you are, FBI agent or veterinarian." Later, after the others had gone, Rebecca sat on the porch steps with Ranger, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. The dog rested his head on her knee, amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. "We did good, partner," she told him softly, stroking his head. "Daniel would be proud of you." Ranger's tail thumped once against the wooden step. Agreement, perhaps, or simply contentment in the quiet moment they shared. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Arizona spring day. Rebecca and Ranger arrived at the clinic early to prepare for a special event, the official opening of the new outdoor rehabilitation space behind the building. What had once been an unused lot was now a carefully designed area for recovering animals to rebuild strength and confidence, complete with adaptive equipment for those with permanent disabilities. By 10 o'clock, a small crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Local officials, clients, supporters, and media representatives mingled in the morning sunshine. Rebecca spotted Jack in his dress uniform, Martha wearing her Sunday best, and Tyler Wilson clutching a hand-drawn card he'd made for the occasion. "Speech time, Doc," Sam prompted, guiding her toward the ribbons stretched across the entrance to the new facility. Rebecca had never enjoyed public speaking, but as she looked at the assembled faces, friends, colleagues, community members who had rallied around her vision, the words came easily. "6 months ago, this community faced a crisis of trust," she began. "We discovered that those sworn to protect us had betrayed that sacred duty. But Prescott is more than one corrupt official or one broken system. Prescott is all of you. People who choose compassion over cruelty, healing over harm, and hope over despair." She gestured toward the rehabilitation space behind her. "This facility represents that choice. It stands as testament to the belief that even the most wounded souls, human or animal, deserve a chance at recovery. Every creature that finds healing here honors the memory of Officer Daniel Matthews, whose courage and integrity cost him his life but ultimately saved many others." At the mention of Matthew's name, Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Jack placed a supportive hand on the elderly woman's shoulder. "I'd like to ask someone special to help me cut this ribbon," Rebecca continued, beckoning to Tyler. "Someone who understands better than most the importance of second chances." The boy stepped forward, shy but determined. Rebecca handed him one handle of the large ceremonial scissors, keeping hold of the other. "Together?" she asked. Tyler nodded, and they cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause. As the crowd began moving into the new facility for tours, Ranger pressed against Rebecca's leg, seeking reassurance amid the noise and activity. "It's okay, boy," she soothed, kneeling to his level. "These are friends." Jack approached, smiling at the interaction. "The hero of the hour looks a bit overwhelmed." "He's still not comfortable in crowds," Rebecca explained. "Too many unpredictable movements." "Some scars take longer to heal than others," Jack observed, his words carrying meaning beyond Ranger's condition. "But he's come further than anyone could have expected." "We all have," Rebecca agreed, rising to her feet. As the day progressed, Rebecca found herself constantly in motion, conducting tours, answering questions, accepting congratulations. By late afternoon, as the event wound down, exhaustion had set in. She retreated to her office for a moment of quiet, Ranger following faithfully. A knock at the door preceded Martha's entrance, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need this, dear," she said, placing 1 cup on Rebecca's desk. "Quite a successful day." "Thank you, Martha." Rebecca accepted the tea gratefully. "For this, and for everything else, the program wouldn't be the same without you." Martha settled into the visitor's chair, her weathered hands cradling her own teacup. "Daniel would have loved all this. He always said animals had a way of healing human hearts that medicine couldn't touch." "He was right," Rebecca agreed, watching as Ranger settled on his bed in the corner, vigilant even in rest. "I've seen it happen over and over in the therapy program." "Including with you," Martha observed gently. "That dog saved you as much as you saved him." Rebecca couldn't deny the truth in the elderly woman's words. When she'd found Ranger, she'd been hiding from her past, burying her true self beneath the persona of a small-town veterinarian. His suffering, his resilience, and his unwavering loyalty had awakened something she'd thought long dead: purpose, passion, the courage to face painful truths. "We saved each other," she acknowledged softly. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Rebecca locked the clinic doors and headed home with Ranger. The day's events had left her drained, but fulfilled, a pleasant weariness settling into her bones. At home, after a simple dinner, she took Ranger for their evening walk along the quiet country road near her house. The desert air was cooling rapidly, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Ranger moved with the fluid grace that had returned to him over months of rehabilitation, his gait showing only the slightest hint of past injuries. They paused at the crest of a small hill, looking out over Prescott in the distance, lights twinkling as evening settled over the town. Rebecca unclipped Ranger's leash, allowing him the freedom to explore the immediate area, a trust that had developed gradually between them. As the German shepherd investigated interesting scents in the sagebrush, Rebecca reflected on the long, strange journey that had brought them to this moment. From Chicago to Prescott, from FBI agent to veterinarian, from isolation to community, her path had been anything but straight. Yet somehow it had led exactly where she needed to be. Ranger returned to her side, pressing against her leg in the way he did when seeking connection. Rebecca knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog's powerful neck, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur, "for saving my life, for teaching me to trust again, for showing me that even the deepest wounds can heal." Ranger answered with a soft whine and a gentle lick to her cheek. Simple, unconditional love from a creature who had endured the worst of humanity, yet still chose to believe in the best. Together, they turned toward home, walking side by side as twilight deepened around them, a woman who had found her true purpose and a dog who had found his way back from darkness, their shared journey a testament to the enduring power of loyalty, courage, and second chances. Behind them, the last light of day faded from the Arizona sky, and ahead the warm glow of home beckoned, a light that no shadow from the past could dim, a peace hard won, but all the more precious for the struggles that had preceded it. In our golden years, we often wonder if our deepest wounds can ever truly heal. Rebecca and Ranger's journey reminds us that it's never too late for second chances. Like Ranger, many of us carry invisible scars, from lost loved ones, broken dreams, or paths not taken. Yet this remarkable story shows that our greatest pain can become our most powerful purpose. Remember how Rebecca found healing not by running from her past, but by using those experiences to help others. Just as Ranger transformed from a beaten, abandoned soul into a healing presence for troubled children, we too can turn our hardships into wisdom that lights the way for others. The peace Rebecca found wasn't in forgetting her parents' tragedy, but in creating something meaningful from her pain. Isn't that the legacy we all hope to build? A life where our struggles become stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. Have you, like Ranger, discovered unexpected healing by helping someone else through their dark times? Or perhaps you've been touched by the loyalty of a four-legged friend who saw you through your toughest days. Share your story of resilience in the comments. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.